I'm Rochelle Baltuck, Director of the March of the Living, Broward County. Welcome to the first of our March of the Living speaker series, held in conjunction with the Southern Region. During these unprecedented times, with not having information on future March activities, we wanted to continue with our educational efforts to bring you Holocaust-related programs of interest. Beginning tonight, we will offer programs once a month, whether hearing survivor testimonies or listening to other individuals and their stories. We know you will find them informative and interesting. Tonight, we will hear from survivor Eric Lipetz. He will dialogue with Ronit Edrich, the Southern Region Director of the March of the Living, and take questions at the end. If you have any questions for Eric during the discussion, please use the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom. I want to thank Amy Wildstein, the Assistant Director of the Broward March of the Living, for her untiring effort in putting together our speaker series. If you use Speaker View, you may have a better viewing experience this evening. Eric and Ronit, you're on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you and welcome, Eric. We're so pleased to have you this evening.
Thank you.
Go ahead and get started so that we can allow you enough time to really share your testimony and answer all of our questions. So Eric, can you please describe for us what your childhood was like before the war in Antwerp? What was your family like? What was your home like? Did you attend school? And did you attend a synagogue?
Well, my life in Antwerp was very good for the Jewish community in general. And there were a lot of Jews in Antwerp because of the diamond industry, which was very big. My father was not in the diamond industry, but he was somewhat involved in that. We had a nice home. I have two older brothers. And I was too young to go to school when the war started. My oldest brother was the only one who was attending school at that time. But it was a very nice life as I remember it, even though I was very, very young. And a lot is recollection from what my parents told me, what other family members told us. My father was a graduate of Liège University in Belgium. It's a very renowned university, comparable to Harvard and Yale over here. And life was good. Life was very good from what I understand. And I don't remember any problems myself, but I remember I was very young at the time. I was 4 years old when the war started.
Thank you, Eric. Can you tell us a little bit about anti-Semitism? Do you recall feeling any type of anti-Semitism while you were still living in Antwerp? I know that you were very young, but were there any specific incidents that you recall that you'd be willing to share?
No, actually, I don't. I would have to, it's a very good question. And I'll have to ask my oldest brother, who's 4 years older than me, and my cousin who lives in Switzerland, who's 8 years older than me, if there was always anti-Semitism in Europe and certainly in Belgium also. But whether it affected us personally, I don't know. I would have to actually ask about that. I'll have to make a point about that. It's a very good question.
So can you share with us your earliest memory of sensing war? What were your feelings like, and at what point did you realize that something was really bound to happen in Antwerp?
Well, I heard my parents often talking about this funny man in Germany called Hitler and comparing him to Charlie Chaplin, and etc. But it meant nothing to me. Nothing meant it at all until the bombing started, when I was awakened by the terrible noise of airplanes and looking out the window and seeing fire and hearing our buildings shake and everything else, and my parents rushing in, and my mother calling up her sisters, and we immediately decided to make a caravan and try to flee because we knew that Germans were doing a blitzkrieg. The Luftwaffe was flying over and bombing and strafing everything around. They didn't care what they hit. Didn't take long for Belgium to surrender.
So you had quite a journey as you fled Antwerp, as you just said before, when you and your family left. Can you share with us a little bit about where you traveled within Europe before ending up in Manila? What was it like for you all that time when you were running and hiding? Can you describe that a little bit for us?
Well, I think it's the probably the first time that I felt fear, because when we were in the cars running away and the Luftwaffe was strafing and bombing on the road, there was a couple times when we had to stop and jump into ditches, and I knew my father or my mother was lying on top of us and my brother, and we were just waiting for the raid to stop. And when they did go away, you get up and you hear screaming and you look around and you see cars overturned, you see fire everywhere, and you hear people screaming and you see bodies strewn all over the place, arms, legs. Not very nice sight for a 4 or 5-year-old child to see. And I think that was the beginning of a lot of fear for me. Now, once we tried to get to Dunkirk or any other place where we thought maybe we could, or parts of France, we didn't realize that the Germans were getting ready to invade there also. But it was very, very difficult. We hid in farmhouses and we just prayed for the best. We got separated a few times because of that. We made it after quite a trip to Spain. My cousin, Benny, he left us in Dunkirk. He went off to Dunkirk because he knew he wouldn't be able to cross borders. They would tell him to go back to the army. But he figured if you could get to Dunkirk, he would be able to get on a boat and get to England. As a matter of fact, he did get there and lost contact with the rest of the family for God knows how long. And in order to get on a boat, he actually stole a uniform from some Polish soldiers who were doing laundry. And he got on, put him on, got on a boat with the other soldiers, but they got quite suspicious of him. And by the time they got near England, Dover, they were, I think, ready to arrest him and perhaps shoot him. And he jumped overboard and just swam to the shore. And he had refuge in England for the whole war. We made it over to Spain, and a long, difficult, very, very difficult journey, hiding in barns and just trying to do the best. We had very little food. We had very little clothing. And when we got to Spain, let me just go back for a few minutes. My father felt that a war was coming, and he was quite a bright man. He decided to buy some diamonds, because if you're running through different countries, nothing's going to get you through except diamonds. No one's interested in currency, which becomes worthless. Gold is too heavy, silver is too bulky. So he did buy quite a few diamonds just before the war started. His mistake was that he went to the bank and put them in a safe deposit box. We weren't expecting to be attacked so quickly, so soon. And all of a sudden he realized, you know, we're not going anywhere without being able to bribe our way through. And he went back to Antwerp with my brother. Now I got the story from my brother, from my father and my aunt. My brother has hardly any recollection, if any, about this incident, but he went back to our house, which was still standing. He dressed up my brother and he put on a nice suit and walked right into Antwerp. And it was already full of German soldiers and Gestapo and everything else. And luckily, my father spoke very, very good German. And he walked right through. He spoke to a few soldiers on the way, and like nothing was wrong, went to the bank, went into the safe deposit vault, got the diamonds out, and walked out and just walked right back to where we were. Well, didn't walk back to where we were. He managed to get out of Antwerp, and then I don't know how he did it, but he managed to go where we were hiding. And thankfully he had the diamonds, because it really, really saved our lives. A lot of Jews did not leave Antwerp. They thought, oh, you know, we're running big businesses here. The Germans are going to need us. And all the rumors you hear are not true. And the German propaganda machine was rolling also and said, please stay, and just continue your diamond business. Nobody realized what they had in mind was to steal as many diamonds from us as they could and then shoot us. There was one incident I would like you to know about, which was just so heartbreaking. Friends of my parents were in the heart of Antwerp. He was a very well-to-do diamond dealer. They had a lovely apartment. And when the Gestapo, the Nazi soldiers came in, they rounded up the Jews immediately. They went up, they knew exactly where he was. They rounded up, they went upstairs to his apartment, knocked the door down. He stood there, they shot him right in the head. And his wife with 2 little children just stood there crying. They pushed her down the stairs with the children and loaded her into a truck. And a German officer, Nazi officer, went over to her with his shiny boots on and his uniform. And he said, Madame, I'm sorry to tell you, but you can only take 1 child with you. And she said, what are you telling me? He says, oh, you just killed my husband. This is all I have, my 2 little babies. Said, Madame, either throw one of the children down or we'll shoot you all right now. With that, she really lost it. She lost her mind. She ended up taking both children and throwing them off the truck. And she was taken to Buchenwald. We thought she was killed during the war. We didn't find out till way after the war, in 1946 or so, that she survived Buchenwald and somehow or other made it to America, and she was living in New York. And we got this full story from her at that time. But it just showed you the cruelty of the Nazis, not only in Belgium, but everywhere. But fortunately, we made it to Spain, and here the trouble started again. They wouldn't let my father through. They said, you've got to go back to Belgium. You've got to fight. If Belgium's finished, what do you want from me? They wouldn't let him through. They wouldn't let him through. But they did allow us through with a few diamonds. So my father somehow or other got hold of his brother who lived in the United States, and he was there for quite a while. He was a very comfortable man, and he was told to go to Morocco. So I don't know how he made it over there, but he went off to Morocco, and all of a sudden we get called into the Belgian consulate in Spain, and we're told, send your husband a telegram saying the children are very ill, come back immediately. My mother didn't want to do it. It's a kind of horror, you know, it's not good and all, but at the end she did do it. After the 3rd telegram, they let my father through. Of course, it cost him a few diamonds, so again, but we made it to Spain. My uncle had arranged for us to get a boat from Lisbon, Portugal to New York, a boat called the Siboney. Now, on the way from Spain to Portugal was kind of scary. Spain already had full of Nazi Gestapo agents all over, and they were eyeing us up and down. It was a very, very scary time. Besides that, we had very, very little to eat. We didn't change our clothes, nothing. We get on this train and it was packed with people. I mean, just unbelievable. Everybody trying to escape. There was also a lot of Belgian soldiers on it. We're all standing, it's dark, and the train starts moving along. And a Belgian soldier goes up to a man who was sitting right next to us. We were standing, and he said, Monsieur, qu'est-ce qu'il y a avec toi? C'est la guerre, je comprends. So, would you please give the lady a seat so she can sit down with her children? And he didn't answer. So he said again, please, sir, get up and give the lady a seat. And that's when he said, I'm a sick man, I have bad leg, I cannot stand up. So one of the Belgian officers, I believe, said to him, look, you have a choice. Either get up and give the lady a seat, or take the children on your lap, or we'll shoot you. So he started getting very nervous, middle-aged man. And he said, okay. He said, I'll take the children on my lap, 2 little children. So with that, one of the officers picks me up and puts me on his lap. I'm sitting there, very innocent. Then he takes my brother, picks him up, and puts him on his other leg. With that, my brother being a little boy also, he's only 13 months older than me. I'm about 5 years old at the time, 6 years old. My brother's leg kicked, and it hit some kind of a transmitter on his leg. It turns out this man was a German spy, and he was trying to transmit to the Nazis where the train was. He was going to get off, and the Luftwaffe was going to bomb and strafe it till there was nothing left, and thousands of people would have been killed. Naturally, the Belgian soldiers caught on right away, and they shut the transmitter off. They took him off the train and shot him. C'est la guerre. This is just the beginning of all the horrors that you see in a war. Nothing nice about a war. We made it to Portugal. We got on a boat. We were told that there were German U-boats all around. We were on a very, very strict blackout. And it was one of the stormiest years in the Atlantic Ocean. It was a difficult, difficult journey. Everybody was sick on the boat. Funny enough, except my father and I, we were fine. But my mother, my 2 brothers were quite ill from the trip. But we made it to New York, and it didn't matter that we were ill. We made it to freedom, so we thought. And we were just so glad to be away from the Nazis, and people were cheering, they were happy. So the Statue of Liberty there. We get off, and we go through customs. We're stopped over there. Who's there? The FBI, the State Department people, and all the officers from who check you out going in and out. And they're talking to us and talking to us. We tell them the story. Everything looked good till one of them said, "Let me see your passports." My father took out all the passports and gave it to them. And all of a sudden they said, "Are you all Jewish?" My parents said, "Yes, of course." So he said, "You know what? We have a Jewish quota here. You can't stay here. We're already overfilled." And with that, my mother starts to cry. Of course, when we see my mother cry, we start crying. And he said, "I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do." Personally, I think he could have cared less. They gave us, I think, less than a month to leave the country. And we said, "Where do you want us to go?" They said, "Go back to Belgium." But Belgium is a captured country. The Nazis have it. We'll be killed as soon as we step off a boat. One thing led to another. Luckily, again, my father's brother stepped in, and he had big textile mills in China and in the Philippines. The Philippines at that time was an American protectorate. And he managed to get us a visa to go to the Philippines. He said my father was going to work for him there. And at least we weren't going to be killed by the Nazis. The last place we wanted to go was the Philippines, but certainly better than going back to Belgium or any other European country and getting killed. So we got, again, going on a boat, crossing the Pacific. We stopped in Hawaii, I think for a day or so. We weren't even allowed to get off the boat. And then we landed in Manila. Manila, the capital of the Philippines. Now you got to understand, coming from a climate in Belgium, which is somewhat like England, basically, fairly damp and wet, and you go to the Philippines, which is so hot and dry, but still it was called the Pearl of the Orient. It was a very beautiful place in its own way. And we were given a small apartment there through my uncle, and we settled in. It didn't take long before the newspapers and the radio was talking about problems with Japan. And Japan had invaded China, and they were killing people left, right, and center. I don't know if you're familiar, there's a book called The Rape of Nanking, where they talk about where the Chinese used over 200, Japanese used over 200,000 Chinese men, women, and children for target practice. My father was getting very, very concerned again. And he said, we can't escape from here. Manila is an island. All the Philippines, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to swim 1,000 miles to Australia? What he did do, though, was he bought quite a few canned goods, soups and beans and anything you could get, carnation milk. If you take canned goods and you turn them over just about every week, they can last for a few years. If you don't, they'll blow up in a year. By blowing up, I mean, they get very swollen, and then you may just as well throw it out. So we did that. Next thing we know, we tried to settle in there. We joined a synagogue there, and it was, life went on. It wasn't pleasant, but we managed. I'm just looking for the picture of the synagogue that I have here.
Eric, while you're looking for that picture, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like? I know you said that you had you belonged to a synagogue, but can you tell us a little bit about what the Jewish community was like? And did you go to school, or what exactly were you doing there as a young child?
Well, we were there not even 1 year before the war started, but yes, we did belong. There was one big synagogue there. I was just looking for the picture. I can show it to you afterwards.
Absolutely.
And it was a wonderful Jewish community there, mainly Sephardim, people from Syria, Lebanon, and all, who had all kinds of businesses there. But also the president of the Philippines, and I say that every time I talk, a man by the name of Manuel Quezon, who was a religious Catholic who loved the Jews. And he made it very possible for us to be as comfortable as possible there. And the Jewish community did a lot to help all of us. We went to Sunday school, and there were plans to go to regular school when Pearl Harbor came. But prior to that, General MacArthur, who was head of the Pacific Fleet, and General Eisenhower, who you may know, who became president of the United States, were both in Manila. And Quezon said to them, is it true, all these rumors I hear about the Jews in Europe, that they're being killed, they're being slaughtered, as well as Catholics, etc.? He said, yes, it's horrible what's going on. So Quezon said, you know what? Tell your State Department to send us as many Jews as they want. Send us 1,000, send us 100,000, send us 1,000,000 Jews. We'll settle them here. The Philippines is so big. We have so many islands here. They can settle in Manila. They can settle in Mindanao, Bataan, and we'll help them. McNutt, who was the American representative, immediately went back to America and met with Roosevelt. Eisenhower sent Roosevelt a cable. But McNutt had a whole to-do with Roosevelt, trying to talk him into letting the Jews and making it possible for them to come to the Philippines. State Department said no, they didn't want to be responsible for all these Jews, and who's going to take care of them and all that. And McNutt said they can take care of themselves, don't worry about it. The bottom line was no. Can you just imagine, just think about it, if those Jews were allowed to come in, even 100,000, even 10,000, no less 1,000,000, the difference it would have made, especially now. Instead, they went up in the ovens. But McNutt was so upset that he quit working for the State Department, and he went back to Indiana, where he was from. He was apparently quite the man. So, but there was a nice social life in the Philippines. It was very, very hot, way before air conditioning, and you had to sleep with a mosquito net because there was malaria, dengue fever, and God knows what else. And now all of a sudden, it's December 7th, 1941. You know what happened? Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. 3,000 young, innocent American boys were killed. More than half the U.S. Pacific Fleet was destroyed. And for us and for a lot of others, we were stuck in Manila in a complete panic. It didn't take long before we started getting bombed in the Philippines. And there I started feeling my first real fear. First of all, we were under blackout conditions. Secondly, we never knew when the Japanese planes were coming over, and we had to run downstairs into the shelters. And I just remember my father taking us by the arms and just running down the stairs, and my mother. It was a terrible time. And there was no escape. There was no escape. You're a family of 5. You just don't know what to do next. I'll tell you what happened next. The Japanese came in, they invaded, and they captured us. They brought us and a lot of other people to Santa Tomas. Santa Tomas is a university in the Philippines in Manila, which they turned into an internment camp, and they threw us in there. We had, again, nothing. We were beginning to get sick. We were hungry, we were starved, and we were so scared. At some point after, I don't know how long we were in there, but my father heard a Japanese officer talking outside, and he was speaking some English. So you've got to understand the Japanese culture. You'll learn very quick, especially if you want to live. They were not exactly in love with us. They didn't care about your religion. I don't think most of them even knew what a Jew was. But they were short in stature, and they resented the fact that most Caucasians were much taller than them. Now, you had to bow really low when you saw a Japanese soldier or a Japanese officer. And for some reason or other, they really despised Caucasian women. So they had to really try to stay in the background or you'd really be in trouble. But my father went out, bowed as low as he could to this Japanese officer. And he said to him, "Sir, I don't know why you're keeping us here. We're not at war with Japan." And the Japanese officer sort of looked at him. He said, "We're Belgian nationals. We're just traveling through, and we got caught up in this war." So the Japanese officer said to him, "Give me your passports." My father gave him his passports, bowed again, and he said, "I will see you in a few days," which he did. And he said to my dad, "Look," he said, "I know who you are. I know where you came from, Belgium. I know your escape route. You're escaping the Nazis also." He said, "We are not at war with Belgium, but you're still considered an enemy alien. But we'll tell you what." He said, "You can go back to your apartment. You can take your wife, your children. But I know that you are now in the bristle business." Bristles is what was used before nylon came in for hairbrushes, paint brushes, you name it. And it's still the best texture that you can get if you want to buy a good brush, whether it be a shaving brush, a paint brush, a hairbrush, whatever. He said, "You will make the equipment to clean the Japanese rifles, and we will let you out." What does my father want to do? He didn't want to work with the enemy, but if he had said no, he would have been beheaded right there, and then he would have gone into the tent and beheaded us. So he said, "Okay." He said, I'll do as you ask." They let us out, and as we were coming back to our apartment, my father noticed that he was being followed. There were some Filipinos across the road. And as soon as we got near the apartment, my father told my mother, "Take the children, go upstairs as quick as you can." And my father was not a man to be fooled around with either. He wasn't tall, but he was very strong. And the Filipinos waved him over. He went right there, and they said to him, "Look, we have guerrillas in the camp. We know what's going on." He said, "How can you help us? We know what they want you to do." So my father really immediately realized that we had friends here. And I got to tell you, in general, the Filipino are one of the most wonderful people you ever want to meet. They're very kind, they're very helpful, and they never let the Japanese completely conquer the Philippines. They were always doing guerrilla attacks. And they said to my father, what can you do? How can you help us? So my father said, look, I'm going to need 50 people to clean the rifles and their other weapons. And we cleaned them with the bristles tied to a piece of metal. But what I can do is not make it overly tight. So when they clean it, then they're putting it up and down the barrel. After a while, the hair, the bristles will get stuck, and the weapon will either misfire or blow up in their face. Well, there was joy like you can't imagine. And that started a wonderful friendship with the Filipino guerrillas and my dad. And a lot of other things happened during the war where my dad helped them, and and they helped us also tremendously. So that was that. And it started. We were told we could go. They left one school open, a Catholic school called La Salle. My two brothers went. I was not too young to go, but I had a big to do with one of the priests there, and I was thrown out immediately because I wouldn't go to church. My brothers had no problem. They didn't force them to church, but they had their eye on me, I guess. So I stayed home. At that point, there was really not too much to do. Life was getting harder and harder. It looked like the war was starting to turn. And my father felt so bad for us that he found this piece of wood and a pair of roller skates, and he made like a skateboard for my brother and I. And one afternoon, we went out and we were skateboarding, and we passed by this house, which was near ours, near our apartment, and there was a big German flag out there. It meant nothing to us. And we're going back and forth. And all of a sudden, this man comes running out, screaming at us. He said, "What are you doing? It's siesta time." And he took the skateboard. He says, "You filthy little Jews." He said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "You're going to get yours. I know who you are, and I know who your parents are. You just wait. We're going to get rid of you pretty quick." And with that, he took the skateboard. He pushed us on the street, scratched up a little bit, but crying. And I said to my brother, I said, "What's he so angry about? We had a bath this morning. Why is he calling us dirty Jews?" But that was that. We were very, very, very upset. We start to walk home. And who's standing on the corner there? A Japanese officer. His name was Muna. We knew Muna just from the neighborhood. There was a big barracks there full of Japanese soldiers. And Muna liked my brother and I for some reason. And we got to communicate with him, even though neither of us knew each other's language. And there was times when he showed us pictures of his family, etc. So we walk by, Muna's there, and he waves us over, and we explained to him what happened. And he looked very angry. With that, he blows a whistle, and about a dozen Japanese soldiers run out of the barracks, fix bayonets on their weapons, and they surround us. And Muna's talking to them in Japanese. And my mother sees us from the apartment building, and she said, "Oh my gosh, they're going to kill my children. They're going to use them for target practice or whatever." And she's crying her eyes out. And I can see that from the street. So I waved to her, and I'm smiling to her. So I wanted her to realize that we're okay. We're okay. We're with our friend Muna. So it calmed things down a bit. And Muna tells us to show him where the house is, to show the soldiers. And we all marched down. You got to figure, two little boys with a dozen soldiers with fixed bayonets surrounding us and a Japanese officer. We walk right up to the house and we show him where the house was. And he talks in Japanese to his soldiers. They take us by the arm. They bring us right to the door. And with that, they're slamming on his door with their rifles. This filthy little Nazi opens the door, and he sees us, and he knows he's in trouble. You've got to understand also the Germans and Japanese really did not like each other. The Germans looked down on the Japanese. They used to call them the little monkeys and uneducated people. And the Japanese just did not like the Germans. But at the end, it became the Axis power anyway. They became allies against the Americans. Nevertheless, one of the Japanese soldiers points to the roller board that's on the floor of their skateboard, and the German says, oh yes, no problem, nice boy, nice boy. He takes the skateboard, and he's about to give it to my brother, and he taps my brother on the head, and he says, good boy. With that, my brother had a bit of a temper on him. With that, my brother bent down, and he gives this German a smack in the face. His glasses come flying off. He said, the Japanese soldiers thought it was the funniest thing in the world. They're laughing and laughing. If this guy could have killed us right there and then, he would have gladly done it. But what could he do with all those Japanese soldiers there? So he didn't say anything. His wife comes from the other room, picks up his glasses, takes the skateboard, and he gives it to me. And we start to go down the stairs, and he says, you nice boy, pointing to me. And he taps me on the head, says, you good boy. And my brother Leon says, did he just hit you? I said, no, he just tapped me on the head. He said, no, he hit you. He turned around, and again, he smacked this Nazi right in the face. With that, the Japanese were rolling on the floor. They could not stop laughing. They thought it was so funny. And this guy couldn't do anything. Thankfully, we were saved at that moment. So we start to go home, and Muna says, where you go? We said, go home to Mama. I said, no. You stay right here in front of his house. I want you every day to be here at this time. And he posted a guard by his house to protect us. So when we went back and forth. So that was just one of the incidents.
Eric, as the war intensified, can you tell us, and the bombings increased, can you share with us a little bit about what it was like? Were you able to remain in the same place, or did you need to move a little bit? Eric, you're muted.
Okay.
There you go. So can you tell us a little bit about...
One afternoon, I was with my father and my two brothers, and we're walking on the boulevard. And after a while, my father said, there's something wrong here. I think we better leave. But it was too late. Dozens of trucks came by full of Japanese soldiers. They rounded everybody up. There was a garbage truck across the road from where we were standing, and a couple of Filipinos there, and they were waving to my father to come, but it was too late, we were surrounded. So one of them came running into the crowd. He grabbed my brother and I, and he said to my father, we can't save you, but we can save the children. And he grabbed us and put us into the garbage truck. Nobody was going to look into a garbage truck to see what was going on. And he took us home. The Japanese took my father, and they brought him into a very, very bad prison camp where very few people come out alive. We got to the house, and my mother's standing there and says, what happened to you? And you look horrible. Where's your father? We told her what happened. Of course, we were all crying and we were all scared. We didn't know. I think it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. We hear the door moving. It was my father. What had happened was they put him in this jail cell, and they were very suspicious of him. Nighttime came, and my father had a package of Camel cigarettes, the last package he had. He was a smoker at the time. And the Japanese were big smokers, and he told there was a guard standing right next to my father's jail cell. And my father showed him the cigarettes, and he signaled, open the jail cell, let me get out, and I'll give you the cigarettes. So this Japanese soldier thought he was going to be very bright, let my father out, and he told him to run, knowing that the other Japanese soldiers around were going to shoot and kill him. My father was a bit smarter than that. He opened the jail cell. My father gave him the cigarettes, My father very casually walked out and walked right through where the Japanese soldiers were till he got to a place where there was jungle. And then he ran like hell and somehow or other made it back to our apartment. There was such a balagan at that time. Nobody even knew such goings on that he wasn't even noticed that he was gone. And it wasn't long after that, again, he was smart, he escaped that. One of our neighbors opens the door as we were going up the stairs and he calls my father in. My father sees a huge swastika on the wall and he figures that's it, you know, now we're finished, now we're finished. He said to my father, look, he said, I'm going to be working with the German embassy here, but I want you to know I'm not a Nazi. I actually hate Hitler. I hate everything that the Nazis are doing. But I must tell you, you've got to get out of here as quickly as possible. The Japanese are going to take over your apartment and the Germans are going to come in here also. And that's going to be the end of you. My father got hold of his friends in the guerrilla forces and they moved us to Santa Ana, which is quite a distance out nearer the jungle. They put us in this big old Spanish house, very, very thick walls and all. And they said, you'll be pretty safe over here with the bombings, which were becoming fairly common already. And just stay here and we'll see what we can do, which we did. Now the bombings started getting worse and worse and worse. We got very, very sick. There was a time there, all of a sudden I broke out in some kind of rash or hives, I don't know what. There was no doctors around. And I heard conversations of my parents that I wasn't going to make it. As it was, I did, I'm here, I did make it. I don't know what I ate or touched or what it was or something bit me, but I did survive. Of course, all of us were full of lice, which was absolutely disgusting. And at another point, my father was out with my oldest brother and me. All of a sudden, a dog comes out of nowhere and bites my brother. And we figured this had to be a rabid dog. What do you do now? What do you do? As if we didn't have enough trouble, nothing to eat, and this happens. Guerrillas came to our aid. They told my father where a doctor was. They spoke to the doctor. My father had to go and get this doctor 20 injections you need at that time if you had rabies. Luckily, this doctor had it, but he wouldn't come unless my father went over there, took him and brought him back and forth. And that lasted for another 20 days. As things got worse, my parents decided that we had to build a shelter. Now, a lot of people build separate shelters for their children, for the wife in one, father, husband, another, the children another, figuring someone's got to survive. And my parents decided, look, either we all make it or we all don't make it. And my father built a shelter in the house. He took some old tables, whatever he could. And he told us, if you hear a siren or if you hear an airplane, just dive into the shelter. And that's what we did. And this went on for so long, years. But we knew the Yanks were coming. We knew the Americans were coming. And then one day after a lot of bombing and everything, it was over. My brothers and I decided to go outside a bit. And there was a church not far from us. And we walk over there and we climb up the steeple and we look outside. Bonita. You can't imagine. You can't imagine what we saw. Angels were there. The Yanks were here. The Yanks were finally here. Thousands of them we saw across the river. We saw tanks, the American flag, jeeps, pontoon boats, everything. They were ready to cross and come into the area where we were. We tried to wave to them, but they didn't see us. But we knew they were coming and went down the steeple as quick as we could. And we ran home. Said, Papa, Mama, l'Américain ici, the Yanks are here, the Yanks are here. And I said, no, it can't be. It's going to be at least another few weeks, another month or so. I said, no, we saw them. We saw them. And with that, we hear rumbling in the street. And my father said, got to get inside. It's probably Japanese soldiers retreating. And he said, no, that's the Yanks. The Yanks are here. They're here. And all of a sudden we saw the American flag on top of a tank. We saw it wave, God bless them, the red, white, and blue. And they came, and the head of the column, there was thousands of soldiers and tanks and jeeps and everything. There was a Colonel Hall there. I actually have a letter from him here. I'm trying to trace him down a bit. And he said, oh my gosh, who are you and what happened? So my parents told him the story. And he told one of his sergeants, unload one of the food trucks. They had hundreds of food trucks there, and put it by their house, which we did the first time we had a decent meal. Prior to that, my father had gotten a chicken. And we figured, well, at least we'll have some eggs, something, didn't even know what an egg was. Well, this chicken laid one egg and dropped dead. So we were scared to eat the chicken, but we had one egg, and my mother boiled it, hard boiled, and one egg for 5 people. She spiced it up, but that was it. So Colonel Hall and the soldiers, we talked for quite a while. And one of the soldiers came over and he saw us, and he saw that we were crying and happy and joy. He put his arm around me and he said, how would you like a baby Ruth? And I looked at him and I looked at my mother, who basically spoke French. And I said, Mama, il est bête, he's crazy. We just got liberated and he wants to give me his baby Ruth. So they of course, the baby Ruth, the chocolate, they all started laughing and everything. But again, it was the beginning of a wonderful friendship. They billeted right near where we were, and it was Passover, Easter time. And would you believe it? These wonderful Yanks, they knew where most of the Jewish community was. They rounded us up and they said, we're taking you for a Seder. A Seder, what is it? What's left? And they brought us to this field, which used to be a racetrack. They had rounded up and there were snipers all over. Still, we made it through, and we had our first Seder. Now, this book, Escape to Manila, written by Ephraim, tells the whole story. There's also pictures there. He was a friend of my oldest brother, and he came to the States also. He became an engineer. He wrote that book. It's a lot about us and our family and what we did. I know we're limited time here, so I cut a lot out. But we had a Seder, our first Seder in Manila, thanks to the Yanks. God bless them. So I tell everybody, when you see that American flag, or when you see a soldier, don't take it for granted. When you hear the Star-Spangled Banner, or when you hear the song, God Bless America, it is God Bless America, because these guys laid their lives out, 18, 19-year-old kids. There was one incident when the Japanese were still there. We saw an American plane being shot down, a fighter plane, and the pilot landed not too far from us. And my oldest brother and I went running over there to see if we could somehow help or do something. He was lying there, and he was dead. But we couldn't see it from the way he was lying. And I saw his face, and I said, come on, pick him up, pick him up. There were a lot of Filipinos went there. One of them took his weapon right away, and they ran. They said to us, you better go. The Japanese soldiers will soon be here, and they'll kill you if they see you with an American pilot. And I said to my brother, let's pick him up. And they turned him over, and there was nothing left of him from the back. You know what? To this day, I can still see his young face. If only I knew him. If only I could have at least known his name. If I could have seen him. If I could have, at one point, back in America, got hold of his parents or his wife or whoever and say, your son died so bravely. We're alive because of him and people like him. It wasn't meant to be. It just wasn't meant to be. To this day, I still see him. I see that beautiful young face lying peacefully, lying on a mound of mud. Anyway, the Yanks freed us, and my brother and I used to go there all the time to eat with them, to be with them. They're all so helpful and so good to us. And one afternoon, we were sitting there. We were, I think, eating lunch or dinner. Or I don't remember what. We were eating Spam, which they hated, and we thought was a filet mignon. It was, after 4.5 years of eating rice whenever you could get it, full of bugs and a fish here and there. All of a sudden, machine guns going over and bullets flying everywhere. All our soldiers' arm goes around me, and I'm rolling down a mound. There were Japanese snipers in the woods not too far from where we were in the jungle, and they were shooting away. By some miracle, I mean, there were hundreds of soldiers there, not a single one got hit. And there were a couple of Filipino guerrillas also. And they said, don't shoot back, because as soon as you raise your head, you're going to get killed. They've got the high ground right now. Give us half an hour. If we don't come back, then call in the artillery. So we're lying there on the ground. I don't know how much time went by, but all of a sudden we hear some screaming. And then we hear them say, coming back, coming back. And they were crossing the field. With their machetes, they had snuck behind the Japanese and cut their heads off. And they were holding their heads. One of them still had glasses on. And I tell you, they were so brave, and they did everything. Now, in Santa Tomas, where my father was taken a few times also, because I'm cutting the story a bit short here, the Japanese colonel in charge there, when the Yanks came, said, I'm going to kill everybody in here unless you give us free passage. So negotiations went on with the American soldiers for quite a while. Finally, the American soldiers, the colonel said to them, we're going to let you out of here without your weapons. We give you free passage out of here, and you can go find your soldiers, your troops, wherever you want. But you can't harm anybody that's in here. They said, okay. They laid down their weapons. The Yanks opened the gates. What the Japanese didn't know, that around the corner were Filipino guerrillas just waiting after 4.5 years of torture, of beheading, of malnutrition, of everything, to get hold of these Japs. And they did some number on them, some number. I can't help it. I have no pity. I have no sympathy for them. Finally, because of a lot of things my father did during the war to help the Filipinos, to help Americans who were shot down and all, we were given passage to America. But again, this is 1945 now. Again, we weren't allowed to stay. And the battle went on. My parents said, we are not leaving. And my uncle, again, was a big help. And I didn't actually become a citizen until 1957, after arriving in 1945. So it was the summer of 45. We landed in San Francisco. There were a lot of American soldiers who were imprisoned in Bataan and Corregidor with us. And here, all of a sudden, early dawn, we landed in San Francisco. And all the soldiers who were prisoners for 4 years, everyone was crying. It was an incredible scene, absolutely incredible scene. You can't imagine. From San Francisco, my father had to stay in Manila. I'm still not quite sure why, what happened, but he had to stay there for another few weeks. We got a train to New York, and my family was waiting for us. My mother's sisters and my uncle. And I'll never forget, we get to Newark, New Jersey, one stop before Grand Central Station. And the train starts to move. And I hear a voice saying, Gusta, Gusta. That was my mother's name, Augusta. Gusta, Gusta, Gusta. It was my father's brother who had escaped also. And he made it to America, and he was looking for my mother. And of course we met, and everybody was in tears. We made it to New York, and we stayed with family in Queens. Rego Park, Forest Hills, Queens, for a long while. Come September, time for school. I'm 10 years old. What's a school? Never was stepped in a school in my life. And I was told, and I was a very nervous kid, to say the least, because I knew, somewhere along the line, the Japanese were going to come back, or the Germans were going. Too many incidents happened. I didn't believe anybody. I just knew that somebody was coming to try to kill us. My mother brought us to the school, and the teacher took me by the hand and brought me upstairs. And, I knew from what my father said, always know how to escape. If the Japanese ever grab you or anything, always look around. You can move faster than them. Know how to escape. Know how to get home. Go upstairs. They put me in a classroom. There are a few other kids there. She closes one door, and then she turns around. She goes to the other door and closes the door. With that, I look out the window. I say, I can't jump. Too high. It was second floor, third floor. I don't remember. With that, I run down the stairs. Run out of the classroom. I run down the stairs. They're chasing me. I said, I'm out of here. I'm not going to get caught. I didn't get this far to get caught and get killed. It was so difficult. There was a woman downstairs. She was a teacher. Her name was Charlotte Ettinger. Her husband was a principal in the school, Sam Ettinger. They had two children. One was my age, Philip, and another son, Stephen. Stephen Ettinger, by the way, if some of you may know the name, is a very well-known veterinarian who wrote a book on veterinary medicine that's used in Cornell University. Brilliant scholar, Stephen. And anyway, she grabs me and she says, what's the matter? Why are you crying? I tell her. I said, I'm not going upstairs. I'm not going to get killed. She said, no, it's not like that here. And she explained to me and she hugged me. And she took me back upstairs and she stayed with me. And that started a lifelong friendship with this woman, Charlotte Ettinger, her husband, Sam and Philip and Stephen. They owned a camp and they let us go there for many years. And actually, when I got older, I worked in one of the camps to wander. It was a wonderful experience, most wonderful people I ever met. And then after high school, I went to college. I went to the Army. My oldest brother, he was the brightest of all of us. He went to Brown University and got a degree there, and then a degree at Yale and University of Pennsylvania. Excuse me just 1 second. I've got to clear my throat. I always had this fear about war. The Cold War was starting, and my brother was going to Brown University. It was admitted, one of the few Jews that were admitted there. And it shows you my father's thinking was the same way. He wrote my brother a letter. He told him, look, if war starts, don't come home. Don't come back to America. Go to Canada. And he gave him the name of some family that we had in Canada. And he even wrote down directions, the highways and all to try to take to escape. He always had that. And years went by the way, and my parents had their 25th wedding anniversary. And that's a silver anniversary. And family and friends brought them a beautiful silver set. And I'm looking at it and I said, wow, it's beautiful. But I saw my father's face. Excuse me 1 second. These talks are not always easy to do, but I think it's necessary.
But we appreciate it, Eric, and I know it's difficult.
Thank you.
I want to thank you.
And I said to my father afterwards, did you like the silver set? He said, yes. Next morning, we always had breakfast together, my dad and I. I said, qu'est-ce qu'il y a, papa? What's wrong with the silver set? He didn't really answer, and I let a few days go by. I said, Papa, dites-moi, tell me, what didn't you like about the silver? And he looked at me with a tear in his eye, and he said, how far can you run with silver? It was always on his mind also, I think, to the day he died. To the day he died. When we were in Israel, he came for my children's bar mitzvah. And the second time around, he had a terrible stroke. And he was put in the hospital. And he's lying there. And some Israeli soldiers walked by and caught my father's eye. And my father, his mind was gone already by then, but he just saw soldiers, and to him, soldiers were Nazis, were German soldiers. He always had that fear also. And he was yelling at them, Nazi, Nazi, I kill you, Nazi, I kill you. Of course, the soldiers understood. I'm sure they've seen plenty of other people like that.
So Eric, can you tell us a little bit about how you met your wonderful wife, Margaret?
Yeah. Yes, she's in the other room. I was working on Wall Street, worked for myself most of the time, and I wasn't. Come in for a second. Ronit wants to say hello to you. Ronit wants to say hello to you. Here she is. Here, look at the screen.
I don't want to see you.
Hi, Margaret. It's so
Hi,
nice.
darling.
I just asked Eric to share a little bit about how he met you.
You want the real story, or you want the story I tell people that makes her blush?
It tells two sides of a story, my darling.
All right. I was looking for a bigger apartment. I had a roommate, and we had a renting agent who said to us, there are a couple of cute English girls in town. And of course, being two bachelors in New York, in Manhattan, fine, beautiful. And she showed us pictures of Margaret and
I don't know when she took these pictures, by the way. I have no idea.
She showed me the picture, and you know what? I knew right there and then, I'm going to marry this girl. I just knew it. And we met at the real estate agent's house about a week later, and we met Margaret and her girlfriend there, and we dated. And 9 months later, we were married. And life is 56 years in June, and 3 beautiful children.
It's 56, yes.
56 years, sorry. And unfortunately, people have asked me, what's the worst thing that happened to you through these times? I said, I'll tell you what the worst thing was. Our middle son, the biggest of all our children, brilliant mathematician, loved music, loved cooking, loved sports. All of a sudden, lived in California at this point. We get a call that your son's in the hospital. What happened? He had a seizure. They took him into the hospital. They did an x-ray. He has a tumor in his head as big as a grapefruit. That was pretty much the beginning of the end. He went for 3 more years on treatment. But there's no punishment worse than losing your child.
I'm going to show you a picture.
His memory always be for a blessing for you and for everyone that
Thank you. But I still count my blessings. We're here, even with this pandemic. We're managing. Compared to the war, it's nothing. And I tell all the kids that I speak to, especially high school kids, this is Ari.
beautiful picture.
Is it clear enough? That's Ari. That's just about a couple weeks before he died.
I'm so sorry for your loss. So
I've got, my oldest son has 2 children, twins, and actually they're going to be bar mitzvah at the end of October in New York. And we don't know if we can go. We don't know the story. Right now, there's a quarantine, and we're looking at the news tonight. It's getting worse in New York, and it's getting worse over here. So I don't know, I'm going to be heartbroken on my grandfather's ashes. I can't see my grandchildren bar mitzvah. That hurts.
I
We have 3 beautiful girls here, right here in Heron Bay, our neighbors, and I think you know Gila, and the children are just wonderful. And our life is good. And you know what? These kids, they've been taken out of school. They've been taken out of their lives, are upside down. And yet they've been so wonderful. I say, one of these days when this is all over, someone's going to write a book about the greatest generation of the 21st century, just like there was the greatest generation of the 20th, the American soldiers. The greatest generation of the 21st century are these wonderful kids who I see all over in the Publix, in the supermarket, or I lecture to them, whatever. And they are so good. They're taking it so well. And I'm just so proud of them. And I think we should all be and be grateful that we've all managed so well. I hope I didn't take too much time.
No, Eric, I was just going to say, I want to thank you so much. And Margaret, I also want to thank you for always allowing Eric to speak with us and for being his biggest cheerleader.
Sure.
I just want to thank you for sharing this very moving and difficult testimony. Eric, I know that it is really hard and emotional to go on this journey as you share your story. And I just want you to know how much we appreciate your willingness to speak, share your experiences about the Shoah, and for allowing all of us to become a witness.
Thank
and
you.
remember your family.
Thank you.
Very big thank you to Amy Wildstein, the Assistant Director of the March of the Living Broward, for putting together tonight's program. Thank you also to Michelle Archambault, the Program Associate for the March of the Living Southern Region, for collaborating with Amy to ensure the success of tonight's program. This program would not be possible without the hard work of Elena Moran and the marketing team from the Jewish Federation of Broward County. Thank you for making all of this possible. And on behalf of Rochelle and me, we want to thank you all for joining us this evening. It's our goal to bring educational opportunities like these to our communities. We hope that you'll join us on November 16th for a conversation with actor Jesse Eisenberg and director Jonathan Jakobowitz from the film Resistance. Please remember to view the film in advance, as this will make the conversation so much more meaningful. Eric, I want to thank you again for joining us this evening. It really was a very impactful, and
Anytime. I'll be glad to talk to any group, anytime. A story has to be told. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.